Scientists found King Richard III in 2012, and they've been lying about his DNA ever since. The discovery made global headlines, a king buried under a parking lot for 500 years. But the DNA test that confirmed his identity also revealed something so disturbing that scientists quietly buried it in the footnotes. And for 12 years, that secret sat hidden until now. The king under the parking lot. In August 2012, archaeologists in Leicester did the impossible. They found King Richard III buried beneath a parking lot. For 527 years, he'd been lost to history. The last English king to die in battle, struck down at Bosworth Field in 1485. His enemies, the Tudors, paraded his naked corpse through the streets. Then they dumped him in a hastily dug grave. Decades later, the church was demolished. The land was paved over. His exact location vanished. But screenwriter Philippa Langley had a hunch. She spent years overlaying medieval maps with modern Leicester. Her research pointed to one spot, a parking lot. In 2012, they broke ground. On the first day, they found human leg bones. The skeleton was in a grave too short for his body. 8 wounds to the skull, 2 fatal. A sword strike to the base of the skull, a halberd thrust through the top of his head. But the detail that made archaeologists' hearts race was the spine. Severe scoliosis, a pronounced curve that would have made one shoulder higher than the other. For centuries, Tudor propaganda depicted Richard as a hunchbacked toad. The bones proved it was an exaggeration based on real condition. They'd found him, but they needed absolute proof. They needed DNA. The perfect match and the impossible break. Dr. Tory King's team drilled into the king's tooth and femur to extract genetic material. Most DNA gets shuffled every generation, but mitochondrial DNA passes unchanged from mother to all children. Richard had an older sister, Anne of York. Genealogists traced Anne's female lineage through 17 generations to Michael Ibsen, a Canadian furniture maker in London. The skeleton's mtDNA matched Ibsen's perfectly. The specific haplogroup is rare. The odds of coincidence were astronomical. In February 2013, the University of Leicester announced the skeleton was, beyond reasonable doubt, King Richard III. The world celebrated, but the scientists ran another test. The Y chromosome passes father to son, creating a paternal signature. They tracked down male line descendants of Edward III. The results came back. Total mismatch. Somewhere in 19 generations, someone's father wasn't who history said. The DNA had proven a lie. But where did it happen? The buried truth. The Y chromosome results sent shockwaves through the historical community. This wasn't just palace gossip. It had earth-shattering implications. The entire Plantagenet claim to the throne was based on an unbroken father-to-son bloodline supposedly ordained by God. The DNA proved that bloodline was not pure. So where did the break occur? The 2014 research paper published in Nature Communications presented 2 possibilities with equal weight. Possibility 1. The break happened after Richard III, somewhere in the 500-year line of Somerset descendants. This was the safe explanation. A minor scandal for one noble family. Nothing more. Possibility 2. The break happened before Richard III. This would mean Richard himself, or his father, or his brother, King Edward IV, had no legitimate blood claim to the throne they fought for. It would mean the entire Wars of the Roses, a brutal 30-year conflict, was based on a genetic lie. The 2014 team concluded they couldn't pinpoint where the break occurred. The The science wasn't advanced enough. They presented both possibilities equally, made it sound uncertain, made it safe. This vagueness allowed the world to focus on the good news. We found the king. They treated the Y chromosome mismatch as a quirky, unsolvable footnote. But the truth was far more disturbing than anyone admitted. And the technology to prove it was just a decade away. The 2025 bombshell. For 10 years, the scandal sat unsolved. Then, in 2025, new technology caught up. A team launched the Royal Bloodline Genomic Reanalysis Project using cutting-edge long-read sequencing. They needed an ancient control sample. They sampled John of Gaunt's tomb at Westminster Abbey. John of Gaunt, son of Edward III, died before any suspected break. The results were a bombshell. First, the Somerset family's Y chromosome line was unbroken back to the 15th century. The break wasn't on their side. Then John of Gaunt's Y chromosome perfectly matched the modern Somerset's. The Somerset line was the true Plantagenet bloodline. Therefore, Richard III's different Y chromosome meant the break happened in Richard's immediate family. The 2025 study proved it. The false paternity occurred between Richard's grandfather and Richard himself. The spotlight fell on Richard, Duke of York, Richard III's father. Suddenly, a 500-year-old rumor clicked into place. The lie that built a dynasty. During the Wars of the Roses, enemies claimed Richard, Duke of York, wasn't his supposed father's son. They claimed his mother, Cecily Neville, had an affair while her husband was away. They even named the father, an English archer named Blayborn. This was dismissed as political mudslinging. But the 2025 DNA proves that rumor was almost certainly true. Richard, Duke of York, the man who started the Wars of the Roses by claiming his blood was purer than the king's, was illegitimate. If the Duke of York had no legitimate claim, neither did his children. King Edward IV had no genetic right to the throne. The princes in the Tower were illegitimate heirs. And Richard III, who claimed the throne by declaring his nephews illegitimate, was also illegitimate. The entire House of York was built on a genetic lie. The Wars of the Roses tore England apart, tens of thousands dead, entire noble families wiped out. At Towton, more men died in a single day than in any other English battle. It was fought over nothing. The DNA confirms the Yorks had no claim at all. This is the disturbing discovery that was so delicately buried in 2014. It wasn't just a random break. It was the break that mattered most, the one that delegitimized an entire chapter of history, the questions nobody wants to answer. The 2025 discovery opened wild theories. What if Cecily Neville knew? Some historians consider the peasant bassinet theory. What if she acquired a baby from a servant and passed it off as her own? A calculating mastermind who set the stage for war with one lie. What if King Edward IV knew? Richard claimed Edward signed a pre-contract marriage to Lady Eleanor Butler, making Edward's children illegitimate. Everyone assumed this was propaganda. But what if it was true? What if Edward, knowing his bloodline was worthless, desperately tried to marry into powerful families? What if Richard III didn't know? Imagine discovering through a deathbed confession that your entire family claim was a lie. What if the princes in the Tower weren't a power grab, but a twisted attempt to cleanse a fraudulent bloodline? He saw his nephews as living proof of the lie. Perhaps he thought he had to erase them to fix the unfixable. The truth they tried to erase. This is why the 2014 discovery was so carefully revised. This wasn't just inconvenient, It was explosive. It questioned the legitimacy of the entire York dynasty and, by extension, the Tudor dynasty that followed. The scientists in 2014 knew what they had found. They just couldn't prove which side of the family tree held the break. So they presented both possibilities equally, made it sound uncertain, made it safe. They let the world celebrate finding a king while quietly noting a genealogical complication in the footnotes. But they knew. And now, 11 years later, with technology they could only dream of in 2014, we know too. The DNA doesn't lie. Richard, Duke of York, was illegitimate. His sons had no claim. The Wars of the Roses were fought over nothing, and one of history's most brutal conflicts was built on a genetic falsehood that no one dared to speak aloud for 500 years. The king they found in the parking lot wasn't really a king at all. At least not by the very rules he lived and died by. That's the disturbing truth they tried to erase. So scientists found King Richard III in 2012, and they've been lying about his DNA ever since. Not because they wanted to deceive us, but because the truth was too explosive to handle. The 2025 breakthrough finally forces us to confront what they've known all along.